Hi, and welcome to the Hofline, your online hotline direct line to the women-only attorneys at Hofheimer Family Law. My name is Katie Carter, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm an attorney at Hofheimer Family Law, a Virginia-based family law firm that represents women exclusively in divorce, custody, and support cases. And I'm here today with Shira Harrell, my friend and colleague, to talk about money and divorce. Thank you so much, Shira, for being here with me today.
Yeah, great to have this conversation today. Thanks, Katie.
It's a difficult conversation, but I think an important one, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of give you a window into how we're thinking about money and saving money and making sure that our clients have the best representation possible throughout the divorce and custody process. So I'm going to jump in with my first question, Shira, which is a big one, everyone, I think. How do you know, or do you even know, how much a case is going to cost when you initially meet a woman?
Well, of course, I'm going to give you the answer of it depends, and you don't really know, but you can kind of get a sense from a person. You can ask them, what are your thoughts on what should happen with the issues? What do you think your spouse's position is? And if they don't seem too far apart, then generally speaking, it shouldn't be but so expensive. But when you have people that are on completely opposite sides of the spectrum as to what to do with assets or kids or support, that's when it becomes more expensive. So I always like to have conversations about what do you want to do? What are your goals? What do you think your husband's goals are? And I try to give my best advice as to what I think the court would do and try to find something that is palatable for everyone. So the key word there is palatable or what's reasonable, not necessarily what someone finds as fair, because fair is a very challenging word. So we need to think about what can we live with? What's acceptable, what's palatable.
Yeah. It's subjective too, right? I mean, what your
Sure.
husband thinks is fair is gonna be different from what you think is fair. Uh, I find that I think it's hard to estimate costs in the very, very beginning. A lot of times, because I've been on both sides, in cases where my clients come in and tell me, "This is gonna be so ea like, I'm gonna be the easiest case. We're so near to an agreement, like, it's not a problem." And other cases where they tell me, "This is going to be like the fight of the century." And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're not right. So I think the early stages, it can be hard to tell, and it's important to remember that there are variables too that we don't know. Like, until I actually have any interactions with your husband and whichever attorney he has chosen to hire, then I don't always feel like I have a real window into what they're going to want or expect.
Mhm.
I try to, come across with a range of options, and start usually negotiating from a place where hopefully, we have a little bit of wiggle room, but it's hard in cases where there doesn't feel like there's a lot of wiggle room, and sometimes it does feel like that, especially if we're already in a position where money was tight. Um,
Sure.
it's
Sure.
hard. It's hard.
It's always a cost benefit analysis of
Mhm.
how much do you want to fight over particular issues. There are some issues that I typically always recommend not to fight over. For example, division of personal property. That is not something generally worth spending a lot of money on unless we're talking about, you know, valuable antiques or artwork or something like that. But just the general
Yeah.
furniture within the home, the best thing to do is to work that out as best you can. And to the extent you can't agree, it's likely less expensive to buy new items than to pay your lawyers to fight over that. So that's definitely one topic I try to you know, encourage the client to resolve as best they can. Of course, if they can't, I am happy to jump in and do the best that I can, but usually an issue like that is not cost effective to
Absolutely.
argue over when we're, typically the big topics that become expensive are custody support and division of assets and debts and things like that.
Yeah, that you've already answered my next question, which is, what are the hot button issues? What are the ones
Mm,
you think are going to lead to more fights? And I mean, you've already said it, but I would say alimony or spousal support and child
right.
custody. Because how do you put a value on those? Like the personal property, for example, like how much a new KitchenAid mixer is going to cost, or how much a new couch, a new bed frame. But
Right.
some things are
Right.
harder to put a price on.
And the difficult part, and this happens really in most divorces, is that the emotional aspect to all of these things that parties have to these issues, that can really complicate things, and that's the benefit of having a lawyer, is that
Yeah.
we view these things through a more objective lens, um, because I always think that the reason why settlements fail is because people let their emotional or their feelings take over their reasonable thinking. And sometimes you really just need to hear from someone who looks at it through an unemotional lens to help you, guide you through this process.
Yeah.
And that can certainly save you a lot of money if you follow your lawyer's advice. Um, and I think we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but one thing that I find is that where people end up wasting money in a divorce is when they follow the advice of their friends and family. Now, your friends and family love you, they care about you, they want what's best for you, but unless they're actively trying divorce cases in Virginia, they're likely not going to give you good advice. And so it's challenging to try to help someone um, navigate through their divorce in a contested divorce when they want to listen to the advice of their friends and family, because generally speaking it's not good advice, it's not effective advice, because it's not what the law says or what's reasonably likely to happen.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think it's hard. I mean, to meet an attorney and then have the level of trust that is required, that really that the representation is going to depend upon. And obviously,
Absolutely.
the people in your life, your parents, your siblings, your friends already have that trust and they're looking out for your best interests. And they're emotionally involved too, right? They want what's
Mhm.
for you. They hate to see you in pain. But I mean, I think some of this comes from doing a good job of screening attorneys at the beginning and finding someone that you can be honest with, whose advice you feel like you can listen to, even if that advice is maybe something that you don't wanna hear. Shira and I did a
Mm,
podcast about that a while ago, and I can link to that so
mm,
to
right,
check out as well. But I
right.
do think it's important to, like, hold space for the possibility that you might be receiving information, advice that you don't like. You might be asked to make decisions that feel like they go against your intuition or your sense of what's fair. And so the strength of the relationship, the trust that you develop between you and your attorney, and that feeling that your attorney is on the same side and is looking out for your interests is so incredibly important, because a lot of times you're going to be told, no, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that. We
Right.
think you should go this way. And being able to receive and process that advice is important. And you can make your own decision. You don't have to follow the advice.
Absolutely. I tell all my clients that they are the boss. I'm just here to give advice. I make suggestions, they make decisions,
Yeah.
and I help them as best as I can in doing that, but ultimately the decision is theirs. And they need to balance it based on the legal advice that they get. And at the beginning, it is a good idea to maybe interview one or two attorneys, see who you have a good feel with, because that is important. You want someone who's going to listen to you, someone who's going to be responsive to you. Um, and I get that it's expensive, but this is a huge process in a person's life, and it can have long-lasting implications for years and years to come. So
Yeah.
it's important that you do the best that you can at the beginning so you can get through this process.
I think that's an excellent point, and it leads me perfectly into the next question, which is how can you control or minimize your costs now
Mm,
without impacting the outcome? Because the goal is always to get the best result now and not have to wind up in court over and over
sure.
again. So how do you
Right.
do it right the first time?
Okay. Well, my advice, the first step is to meet with an attorney to figure out what your rights and entitlements are. Uh, and it's probably best to do that maybe even before you talk to your husband about what you're thinking about, because you need to get a good sense of what you're entitled to.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think I think the number one thing is be careful what you research on Google, and be careful what forms you download from Google. I would say that my most expensive divorces have been where the parties have written their own agreement. And the reason why those cases are so expensive is because the language used is so ambiguous or maybe even missing, that it takes tens of thousands of dollars to try to enforce the terms. I'll give an example. Had a case where the parties wrote their own agreement because they wanted to save money, and the wife was giving up her interest in the house, but she failed to include any language that she was coming off the mortgage. So when she went to buy her own house and her mortgage broker said, "Well, you don't qualify because you're on this other house," there was nothing she could do because this agreement, which once you sign it, you can't unsign it, there was nothing she could do. She did not include in a provision in that agreement that her husband had to remove her name from the mortgage, and now she was kinda stuck. So those are the types of things, just one example, where having a lawyer can really help protect you long term,
Yeah.
and these are important things.
And the same goes for AI, right? I think less people are relying on Google and random internet forms, and now they're using AI. And I've seen AI do incredible things, but I've seen it do some abysmal things too.
Mm,
And if you're not willing to put the time and energy in to do the research and make sure that what you have is going to, help protect you both now in terms of getting the divorce and or getting custody resolved, and in the future and preventing you from having to go back to court or renegotiate these things, you should ask someone, right? And I always tell people, like, not everyone seems to realize this, but you don't necessarily have to hire an attorney and have them retained to work on your case to consult with an attorney. So if you turn to AI and you've drafted an agreement, before you sign it, before you show it to the other side, you can at least have it reviewed. And talking to someone like Shira and realizing that that language isn't there that has him refinancing to get you off the mortgage, is going to be worth the cost of a consult, right? I mean,
yeah,
in these
absolutely.
cases, there's tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're dividing. So if you end up with a lesser portion of the debt or a greater portion of the assets, or you're protected from some expensive situation that you have to extricate yourself from later, then that money is an investment in a peaceful and financially secure future too.
Right, because the key with AI is AI can be great, but it all depends on what you're tasking it. What are you putting as the input for AI to do? So if you are unaware of the terms and all the conditions that you want to make sure are included, it's not necessarily the case that AI is going to think about that for you. So I've seen that happen where, our firm uses AI and you can put in a chat and it gives out a response of, wait a minute, that's not right. No, no, no,
Yeah.
that's
No, I
not
don't like
correct at
that.
all. We're not doing that. So you have to be really careful,
Yeah.
because really the key point, and I know that we say this in Second Saturday, is that once you sign that agreement, that is it. And it's just so important, and Katie's right that even if you just come for a consultation to have an agreement reviewed, bring that agreement. We will review it for you, and at least you can get advice as to the language to know where to go from there. Even if you don't end up hiring us, at least you know what these terms mean.
Yeah, and you can come back more than once. I mean,
Sure.
I've had several, not clients because they don't retain, but people over the years who have come back, and especially as they try to, draft something on their own, they've come back and asked, "This is the latest iteration," or "We've been to mediation and this is what the mediator came up with." Because once you sign it, it is almost certainly not gonna be overturned. And I mean, I've seen those cases too, these terrible agreements that people come back and, want to fix, and sometimes we can fix it, sometimes we can't, but it's always a lot more expensive than it was to do it right the first time, especially if the husband is, high conflict and is not wanting to revisit these issues that were already decided in his favor. And, it's really it's terrible to have those conversations with a woman who is, desperate to get something that she didn't get the first time, and to have to tell her that that we don't think it's possible. And worse, I worry that then they're gonna go to someone else who's only gonna see that the money is green, and they're gonna take the case just to find out that,
Mhm.
they can spend you could spend 10, 20, $30,000 and maybe still not get that result later.
Right.
So,
Right.
this is
And if you go to mediation, mediation is a great alternative to litigation. And if you do end up coming to terms with your husband in mediation and the mediator writes an agreement, do not sign that agreement in mediation. have a consultation, take it to your attorney, get it reviewed. Do not
Yeah.
rely on the mediator to look out for your best interest because that person is not there to represent you or represent your husband or advocate for either one of you. They're just there to help facilitate effective communication. So it's mission critical that you have that reviewed on your behalf, and do not trust your husband if he says, "Oh, I told my lawyer to look out for you." No, no. A lawyer can only represent one side, and we're not allowed to represent both sides in any situation. So it's
Yeah.
super critical that you have someone um, looking out for your best interest.
Yeah, trust, but, like, verify.
Absolutely, before you
I
sign.
mean, but you definitely wanna make sure from someone who is only looking out for your interests
Right.
that it says what you think it says. Legal language is notoriously difficult to translate, especially even for me, sometimes I have to, I read these provisions, like, out loud to myself. I'm like, "What are they trying to do here?" Uh,
Hmm.
you just wanna make sure that you know what you're signing because
Right.
unsigning is almost certainly not possible, and even if you are able to, improve upon the agreement in the future, it's almost certainly gonna cost you more than it would have cost you
Oh,
to.
for sure. And it's such a headache. And the whole purpose of an agreement is to keep you out of court. That's the goal
Yeah.
when I write an agreement is that we don't have to litigate. Because who wants to do that?
No, but not me. You know that.
No,
No, I don't.
I mean, no one wants to do that. They want an agreement. They want it done right the first time. And it's really the most cost effective way is to engage a lawyer to write your agreement.
Yeah. So what do you think, Shira, are, like, the hidden or other unexpected costs that you might come across in a divorce case?
Um, So it's always challenging if you're not completely honest with your lawyer at the very beginning. I've had situations where I was told most of the story, and then when I go to negotiate, it's opposing counsel who tells me some facts I had not heard about before, and then, of course, I have to verify that with my client. When I talk to my client about it, sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not, but when it's true, it's always best to tell your lawyer the bad facts at the beginning because that's part of the analysis of how to ultimately approach the negotiation. Um, and this is a reason why you need to be able to have that relationship and that level of comfort with
Yeah.
your lawyer to be able to tell them the truth. I wanna know these things because that's how I can best represent you. I don't wanna find out, um, from opposing counsel
Mm.
things that would have been better to have prepared for in the beginning. So I think being as honest as possible with your lawyer is a critical task.
Yeah, it keeps the train on the tracks. Those little deviations where you're trying to figure
Does.
things
It
that can
does.
be expensive, and it can undermine everyone's confidence in the process too. Like,
Sure.
even not that we care about your husband's experience with the process, but I don't want to put him off signing an agreement because he feels like in some ways we're being disingenuous or deliberately dishonest. That's it's always, something that attorneys are having to fight against, especially attorneys who are really trying their best to do the right, most ethical things by their clients. When we go into it with the wrong information and we look like we're kind of deliberately deceiving someone, even though we didn't know the truth
Right.
ourselves.
Right. And there's no judgment. I mean, we've heard it all. I, I don't even know what else to say about that, but you don't
Yeah,
have to,
heard
my
it all.
clients don't have to worry about telling me strange
Yep.
facts or things they're embarrassed about. No judgment. I really don't care. I don't mean it to say like that, but I don't judge you as a person. I just want to help you.
Yeah.
But I can only help you if I know the whole story.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, if you were interviewing family lawyer Shira, how would you choose a family lawyer whose financial practices were kind of in alignment with your budget? What questions would you be asking? What things would you be researching?
I would ask how often do they try cases? How often do they settle cases? What is their philosophy about settlement and mediation?
Mm.
And I would ask what is their process for mediation? I think this is really important. So I take the philosophy of preparing for mediation is just as important as preparing for trial. And the
Yeah.
more prepared you are for mediation, the more chance you have of success. Now, mediation, let me say, can look like it can come in various forms. So it can be just the parties, it could be the parties with their attorneys. So it can be all, shapes and sizes. And what I'm referring to here is when you have mediation when both sides are represented and you have, let's say, a retired judge as the mediator or some other um, very experienced family law mediator. And so in those cases, you're going to be paying this mediator to help you negotiate this case. And I think it takes a lot of work and preparation in advance to have the best chance of success. So I would ask a lawyer about that because it's really not worth your while to kind of wing it because some people think, oh, it's mediation. I don't have to put on evidence. I don't have to do so much. I'll just kind of figure it out the day before and we'll go and see what happens. I don't do that. I don't think that works well. Um, and so I think it's important to find out from someone who you're hiring, what is their philosophy? Will they
Yeah.
prepare an agreement in advance? And that's just an example. So I like to prepare an agreement in advance so that my client has a chance to read, what we call the boilerplate provisions. I'd
Yeah.
like to send it to the other side to make sure we can all get on the same page as to just the standard language. And then the process of mediation, to the extent we come to an agreement, we fill in the blanks. And what happens when you do it that way, now your client is not reading a 20-page document for the first time
Right.
after mediating for 8 hours, which is not a position you want to put yourself in.
That's
That's
stressful.
very stressful. And your mind is just it's spinning. You're just so tired. So preparing is really the key for mediation. And most cases do settle in family law. So I think this is an important conversation to have with anybody that you plan on engaging to represent you.
Yeah, I think it's always important to ask all those questions you have about, how attorneys bill, because for a lot of people, what they've seen from attorneys is, like, what they see on TV, like personal injury attorneys. There's lots of those commercials, like, no fee unless we win for you or whatever, and family lawyers can't bill like that. We can't take a percentage
Right.
of it's considered unethical. So, we bill differently. We usually take cases on retainers, which is a certain amount of money that we take upfront, and then we bill from them in increments of a tenth of an hour as work is done. So basically, you are charged for how long your case takes to complete. And talking to your attorney about that, about how she bills, about what her hourly rate is, whether she works with a paralegal, and if so, what that paralegal's hourly rate is, and how they share the division of responsibility between the two of them. I mean, I hear a lot of people say, I want the work in my case done by an attorney, but that's not always the case. Like, paralegals are incredibly valuable resources who often
Absolutely.
bill for far, far less than the attorney, and in some cases are better at certain things than the attorney because they're the ones handling it. Like, I mean, one of the things that jumps to my mind is like quadros. I feel like I always have questions about quadros, and I always go to the paralegals because they're usually the ones preparing the first draft. And it's a really important kind of symbiosis, a kind of relationship that can help the client save money. And when you see someone, maybe like a solo practitioner, someone working on their own who doesn't have a robust office staff to support them, they might be charging a lesser hourly rate, but they're doing everything. Like, you're paying them to open and file the mail. Whereas, at a firm like ours, where we have kind of a lot of support built in between attorneys, paralegals, and even, front desk and more kind of like office support, the opening and the filing of mail and things are often happening without charges even to clients, which might not be the case at some other firms. So ask about the team and the people that would be touching your case, the people you would be talking to or working with, because that's going to have a lot to do with how much your case is going to cost too. And I mean, we always say kind of the basic advice, like being prepared is really helpful. I mean, I think this goes hand in hand with being truthful. But, discovery, for example, is a really expensive part of the process. So, to
It
the
is.
extent that you can respond to your lawyer and send in the things that the lawyer is asking for and do it in a timely manner and do it not that you don't have to like follow our organizational scheme, but to have it organized but in some way,
Right.
like oldest to newest to oldest, it doesn't even matter, but have some sort of organizational structure, have some tabs, provide all the things, and do it in a timely way, and really like be a partner with your attorney to get everything done, reviewing things when they're asked for and responding even when it's hard, and it is hard. And a lot of women kind of I mean, maybe not a lot, but do the ostrich thing where they bury their head in the sand and they're like, "I'm so overwhelmed, I, like, can't even," and that's not helping you. I think it's more helpful to say to your attorney, "You know what? I'm having a really hard time. Can we break this down into manageable portions?" And just having communication with your attorney is gonna make sure that your attorney knows where your head is at and how they can help support you, but help keep that train on the tracks and keep these expensive deviations from happening.
Right, and that's a great conversation to have with the paralegal to say,
Yeah.
"I'm feeling overwhelmed. What's the best way to approach this?" Because
Yeah.
completing discovery is like doing your taxes. Nobody wants to do it.
It's awful.
Nobody.
It's
They call discovery the armpit of litigation. No one
so
likes it.
cool.
Everybody
Well,
hates
and
it.
they ask for everything. They
They
ask
ask
this
for everything, and
and that's
you're thinking, "Why on earth
yeah.
why on earth is this relevant? Why do I have to do it?" Well, you just do most
Yeah.
times. And so just getting it done, and so working with the paralegal to get these documents produced and get it out, it's just what
Yeah.
needs to be done, and it's feels so good when it's completed.
Yeah, yeah, and it saves so much money to provide that information as opposed to having your attorney try to go out and get it or, take
Oh,
effort
sure.
to
Sure.
already provide. So, I mean, I think so much of this goes back to the relationship between you and your attorney, making sure it's someone the person that you hire is someone that you can trust, someone that you can have difficult conversations with. I know we're telling you, we're not judging you, we're here to help, but you still wanna find, a friendly enough face that you can sit there in their office and admit things that may not be uncomfortable to us, but are uncomfortable to you. And
Right.
having a good relationship is gonna go such a long way towards your confidence in the process, and that relates to how you feel about what you've been charged. In our area, family law attorneys are charging usually somewhere between 3 and 6 or $700 an hour, which is a lot per hour. It's maybe not as much as you might see if your case was in Northern Virginia or if you were in, Hollywood or somewhere really expensive, but it's a lot to most people, so you wanna be having these conversations. It's responsible to be having conversations about budget and your concerns and where to draw lines so that your attorney can move forward comfortably and confidently and know how to best represent you.
Right, absolutely.
Did you have anything else to add, Shira? I think it's been a great conversation. I hope it's been really helpful to everyone listening.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think bottom line, the takeaways from this conversation is do not sign anything your husband gives you without having it reviewed by your own attorney, whether that person has been retained or through a consultation.
Yes.
Um, I think that's really the best advice I can give is
Got
to
it. Get it done
don't
right the first
don't
time.
sign it. That's the golden rule. And I
Mm.
guess the second golden rule, and these are things that Charlie Hofheimer always used to say, is don't believe everything your husband tells you.
Yeah, you're not on the same team anymore.
Right, right,
No, back to trust but verify. Totally fine. Lots
right.
of people work through a divorce relatively amicably, and
Sure.
I know we hear so much about the high conflict situations or the ones that result in some litigation, but in a lot of cases, there is a relatively amicable relationship and sometimes a really collaborative co-parenting relationship, and we love to see that, but, at least the divorce process for the short term, we're sort of adversarial, so don't overshare, don't take everything he says to you to the bank. This is something you should be like strategy is something you should be working through with your attorney and talking about what makes sense and what to share and maybe what not to share. So that you can, keep that train on the tracks throughout your case. And I think that's going to help you save a ton of money.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Shira, for being here. I think this
And
is a great conversation. Thank
yes,
you
it was a good
so much.
conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, it was fun for me, I hope it's fun to listen
Yeah, it was.
to,
I
and
always like having these talks.
I know, I mean, I think it's so helpful, and it's a lot of things that people don't think about who aren't hiring attorneys on a regular basis, or maybe they're hiring a different kind of attorney. They've worked with a PI attorney or an estate planning
Right.
attorney, and family law is different. But
It is.
the more you know, the better. The better prepared you are, the better choices you can make. That's why we have 4 free books, a number of free reports, a tons of blogs and articles and videos and other podcasts that you can check out on our website at hoflaw.com. That is HOFLAW.com. Thank you again to everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.